Welcome to our deepfake webinar. It's amazing how many folks registered for this webinar, and no surprise to us because this is certainly a hot topic. We expected the number of registration, to come in place. We have some exciting topics that are being talked about today. So without any further ado, let me just go ahead and start. And with me on the webinar today is Connor White, who is our president of New Industries. And Connor was the president of the Americas, and previously at Dayon, he was the CTO. So he's a technical guru or technical geek, as I call him, a lot of experience in this domain, and even started his career in the AI field. So I do remind him every now and then that he lost his hair because of that. And also on the webinar with me, Matt Smallman, founder and Simnex Consulting, and Matt is an expert in the contact center or call center space, as you call it, and we can hear from him as well. On this webinar, we're going to talk about the synthetic voices and the fake happening around that, the solutions available out there, what are the recommendations that we have, for you. And before we start, just a couple of reminders: all the attendees are muted, so if you're not going to be able to speak, but you'll be able to ask questions. So please go ahead and ask questions via the question panel that you see on the screen here. And I'll remind you about that every now and then. And at the end, we have enough time to do a series of questions. And as we start, I just want to remind everyone, and in case the first time you hear about us, what are we, what do we do, what we're working on all the time. So Dayon is we serve a global organization to provide with our proven identity continuity platform, delivering secure, frictionless cross-channel authentication and regulation compliant identity verification solution at scale. And we are certainly serving various customers across 6 continents, the majority of our customers in the financial space, securing over 1 billion identities worldwide, and really stunning, we have average about 250 million daily authentication that we process with a variety of solutions that we have. This is a screen of or logo of some of our marquee customers that are in a variety of sectors. And again, as you can see here, most of them in the financial sector, in the telco space, the travel industry, the retail environment, and others as well. So again, we've been in business for over 20 years. We're not a startup, starting new with AI. We've been in the business for a while. We've served many customers, and we continue to do that and innovate with our labs and innovation tracks as we go along. And last slide on my end, just recognized by the industry on the work and the technology that we provided. So most recently, we've been awarded top leader in with the Frost & Sullivan radar for biometric authentication solutions. We've been previously also recipient of top digital identity solutions from Enterprise Security, mentioned in various reports with Gartner, Opus Research, and Javelin. And without any further ado, I'm going to pass on now the mic to Matt. And Matt, it's all yours.
Thanks very much, George. Just to expand on George's introduction, yes, my name's Matt Smallman. I'm the author of this book that's tactfully positioned behind me, if I can get my finger in the right place, Unlock Your Call Center. And I work with organizations across the globe to help them improve the security, usability, and efficiency of their call center security processes. And I found myself in this place because more than a decade ago, leading contact center strategy and change for a large UK retail bank, it became obvious to me that the way in which we try to secure those interactions with customers just wasn't working either for customers or for us as an organization. And that's led me on a pretty interesting journey over the last few years. But part of that has been understanding the range of threats that organizations face. And that's why I'm really delighted to be invited to speak to you today about this particular issue, which is deepfake and synthetic voices. So if we just jump to the next slide, George, I think it's really important when we think about this issue to try and extract some of the myth and the hype from the reality of this. And to do that, I'd like to go right back in time and look at what is probably the first recorded example of synthetic speech. And this is a machine that I think you can see in a museum in Amsterdam, the Von Kempelen speaking machine. And this is a a pair of bellows from a fireplace pushed through a bagpipe reed to try and represent human voices. And it's understandable that over time we've become fascinated and have always wanted to replicate the human voice and try and do more to be like that. And that has only accelerated over time. So from the 1800s through to the next slide, George, which is the 1939 World Fair, where you'll see the first example of a kind of electromechanical synthetic speech. And I learned some new things about this machine today. So this is the Bell Labs Voda machine, and the lady who's sitting there took a year to learn how to use this machine, and it's a specific combination of keys that are required to create every syllable. And after the fair, she ran a course for Bell Labs people that was a year long, and 100 people started that course, and only 20 people were successfully able to complete it, being able to replicate the human voice. And unfortunately, I don't have a sample of it today, but it really does sound nothing like the human voice. If you can imagine the films of the 1960s and similar, and the kind of synthetic voices you'd have heard in there, it's worse than that. So if we jump forward then a bit, clearly as computer power and our ambitions have improved over time, the desire to get better and better at synthetic speech and artificial voices has increased. And here is probably an example that everyone on the phone on the call today will recognize. This is actually all of the gear that was stuck under Stephen Hawking's wheelchair in order to allow him to create that synthetic voice that you'll know from many of the documentaries and interviews created in the 80s and 90s with him. And I think we can all recognize that that sounds nothing like the human voice. So if we fast forward today, what's really changed? And what's really changed is, as we've seen with things like ChatGPT and large language models, the sheer availability of both data and computational power and scientific methods has enabled many organizations to take large corpuses of audio to create pre-trained models that they can then apply to many different situations. Just a few of the examples on here, but obviously including all of the big names. But why are they doing that? And is this technology being designed for the purpose of defrauding and creating imposters? No, not really. There are many, many genuine use cases. I think one of the most interesting I've seen most recently is in the next version of iOS, Apple will release their personal voice service, which enables people who are at risk of losing their voice through hereditary or other illnesses to create a sample of their own voice and to be able to use that in the future to speak in their own voice. And you can imagine how empowering and reassuring that's going to be to somebody who faces that. So there's some really genuinely valid use cases. Some of the other examples here are things like automated voice assistants, creating far more natural language voice self-service solutions, whether that's on the phone or on your device. In the case of Descript, helping podcast producers edit and change podcasts after they've been produced. In the case of some of these other people here, in order to create video game characters that can be far more realistic. But what they all share in common is, one, a dependency on these pre-trained models, and two, their objective is to create voices that sound alike to humans, but that are not necessarily alike when you investigate them at a forensic level. Their commercial objectives are different potentially from the bad actors that we'll talk about in a minute. So when I think about evaluating this threat, if you look at the next slide, George, what I really think about is these three different dimensions, and you should as well. I think you're probably doing this subtly anyway when you think about it. But the first is quality. If we think back to those first examples, they didn't even sound like humans, let alone a specific human, let alone a specific human having a varied conversation. But even today, the vast majority of synthetic and deepfake voices don't look like humans or sound like the humans they purport to be when evaluated by biometric and other systems. But they have achieved a commercial objective of those organizations to create that actress to replace the recording that was done incorrectly on set, or to re-edit that podcast that you'll listen to in the car with all that background noise, or to create a good enough voice that can talk to you in an interactive voice response service on the phone. The second criteria then, when we're thinking about creating specifically sounding voices, is the amount of audio and the nature of that audio that's required. If we think back just a few years, it would have taken a recording artist or a voiceover artist several hours, if not days, in a studio to record specific phrases in specific ways in order that speech scientists could create a synthetic voice that sounded mostly like them. Today, however, that has come down to maybe up to an hour for a very realistic voice, maybe 15 minutes for a good enough voice, and in some cases, as purported by Apple, by Microsoft and Google and a few other faces and organizations in the last few months, a matter of 20 or 30 seconds to create a voice which, having heard some of them, sounds a bit like you, but wouldn't pass many tests of that. So the amount of audio that's being required is dramatically reducing, as is the structure of that audio, where it used to be that you had to read very specific phrases in order to be captured in these systems. Today, you can just talk in free speech, and that creates all sorts of risks, potentially for people who have a lot of audio recordings of them in the public domain. And then the final criteria, and again, this speaks to some of those commercial objectives, is really the speed of generation. If I'm creating an interactive voice response system or a voice assistant, then I need to be able to generate the voice very quickly, but my quality criteria are low because it needs to sound just good enough. If I'm creating a voiceover for a major actor or actress in a Hollywood blockbuster, then I don't really care about speed of generation, I care about quality. So we see this trade-off all the time. And whilst today we see some very high quality systems, they invariably have quite long speed, they take a long time to generate that text and require high levels of audio. And we see some lower quality systems that can generate audio slightly more quickly, but requiring less audio to produce them. So you see a bit of a dynamic there. So we're by no means there in the world of perfect synthetic voices that sound exactly like you from just a mere snippet of your voice. But computational power being what it is, these things will improve over time. If we jump onto the next slide then, George, let's just have a think about what that means for bad actors and what opportunities that creates from them. And I think about them in these three category areas. First off, it's the opportunity for the bad actor to sound like someone different. They don't necessarily care who they sound like different, they just don't sound like themselves. And we'll move on to why that is a particular threat to consumers later on. The second is for them to sound like many people, so that to one person they may sound like many people, and it doesn't necessarily care who those many people are, just that they are sufficiently different to fool or trick someone. And the final use case is really to sound like someone specific, to adopt a specific identity. So if we jump onto the next slide, we'll see how those then bring to bear in two particular use cases. First is against the consumer, and this is the one I'm most worried about because it's the hardest to protect. As we'll hear about from Dayon shortly, there are many things we can do on the enterprise to protect ourselves, but it's going to be very hard to protect consumers from some of these synthetic voices. The first is trust. I'm not sure who's recently been called by Microsoft's call center telling you they have a problem with Windows 7 and they'd like to remote into your computer to install an update. But invariably, those call centers don't sound like they're from down the road from where you live. They sound like they're from foreign countries, and it's relatively easy to spot and identify those. Imagine if those sounded like they were just from somebody you might meet in your local supermarket. It becomes increasingly hard for consumers to trust the voices that they're hearing on the end of the phone, whether that be someone who just sounds a bit like them, or whether that's someone who sounds very specifically like someone that they know. And we've seen a few cases in the US recently of extortion, where individuals have been, their children have been, their voices have been replicated using social media or voicemails in order to fool the parents into believing they're in distress. And there's been some discussion of that in the US Senate recently. So I think trust is a big issue here, particularly as it purports to how organizations might also be trusted when we try to make those outbound calls to organizations. I think we'll see consumers be less and less trusting of the voice calls they receive from us. The second factor then that this enables from the bad actors perspective is automation on an unprecedented scale. So this enables those bad actors to recreate human sounding, but not specifically them voices that they can use time and time again against consumers. The text message that you probably about your son or daughter who's lost their keys and their mobile, who needs you to transfer $200 or £50 to their friend's mobile phone. That doesn't look very realistic when it's received by a text, but imagine what it sounds like when it's received as a voicemail or something similar to that. So automation on an unprecedented scale means that, again, consumers are going to be less and less trusting of the voices there. On the enterprise side, then, something I think we're probably more interested in today's discussion on the next slide. I think this creates three big problems, and roughly in this level of hierarchy. So the first is about just sounding different, the bad actor sounding different from themselves or sounding like many people. And that is achievable with the technology available today. And that is the ability to create synthetic identities. You imagine when many customers open or start a relationship with your organization, you obviously do an amount of due diligence to make sure they are who they claim to be, particularly if you're working in financial services and you have a whole bunch of obligations associated with that. You do what you can to check their documents and the like. But imagine if I could take a photograph of an individual, a 30-year-old Midwestern male, and be very easily be able to recreate their voice and then recreate a voice that sounds generically like that person, and then call your call center and purport to be that person in order to open an account in a relationship. So I can see, whilst today synthetic identities are an online challenge, we can see that threat moving into the call center and telephone-based onboarding processes. The second then is really what I call business process compromise, and Verizon published some research just a month or so ago looking at the data breaches over 2021 and 21 through 22, and what they call business email compromise, where somebody does something that they think they're supposed to do as part of a business process on receipt because they believe they've received an email from somebody who has that authority. That can just exponentially increase when I'm able to recreate the voice of the finance director and authorize the payment of that invoice. I see increasingly that internal business processes that today aren't necessarily susceptible to hacking and external attack become vulnerable because they are they're analog and they're offline, but they are crucially dependent on voice or telephone calls between individuals. And I think this even goes as far as some elements of national infrastructure and critical national infrastructure that are protected by recognizing the person on the end of the phone and a certain amount of obscurity that exists in those processes. And then the final category is really the final category is really customer impersonation. So whether that individual is just pretending to be a middle-aged Northern England English lady in order to socially engineer an agent, which is technically feasible today, or whether they are trying to purport to be specifically Matt Smallman and bypass the biometric authentication system, customer impersonation, a specific identity or a specific generalized identity, I think is the final risk that organizations need to be aware of, particularly those that are focused on, that have knowledge-based authentication processes in their call centers. Today, many frauds are identified by agents just being very suspicious that this person who is allegedly 80 on their date, based on their date of birth, doesn't really sound like an 80-year-old, or this person who allegedly lives in the north of England and has a very Anglo-Saxon surname doesn't necessarily sound like that. Now, that they may be prejudiced in some cases and not always correct, but a significant amount of fraud is identified in this way, and that in some ways provides a backstop to deficient security processes that we have today. It's going to be increasingly possible to bypass those kind of systems. But all is not lost, and I think that's the key message I want to get across to you today, particularly when we think about securing the enterprise. As I've said in those previous slides, the makers of these systems and those who are investing in building them, and let's not underestimate the sheer amount of computational power and expense and investment that's gone into creating these voices. This is not something that's easily done in a back room or on a home computer. It requires significant computational power to create those pre-trained models that sit at the basis of all of these systems. Yes, I can do some stuff using those off the back, but the number of those models is likely, and the mechanisms for transforming them is likely to be finite. And that allows us some critical measures of protection. The first off is that invariably those recordings are going to be, those synthetic voices are going to be played back to us, and there are many ways in which we can detect things like compression in audio, the use of microphones and speakers as things are being played back to us in the call center. Those organizations themselves have no incentive or aspirations to be associated with bad actors, and therefore increasingly we're seeing organizations add watermarking technology, inaudible watermarks that are easily detectable and even attributable back to specific users of their services, again that we're able to detect if we listen to those calls. And then finally, because these models are dependent on some common techniques and some common pre-trained models, we're able to build detection systems that specifically look for the characteristics that are inherent in those models. And Connor and Dayon are going to talk to you a bit about that in the next segment. The final thing, though, is I think it really highlights the need for, as we think about enterprise and securing the call center, to think about multi-factor authentication. And I don't mean a harder, more characters in the PIN number, or adding alphanumerics and special characters to your password. I mean thinking about modern security methods that use the inherent properties of the calls that the customer is making to you, whether that be the device they're using and the signaling associated with that call, whether that be the content of that call and the behavior they're showing on it, or whether that be the sound of their voice that they're using on the call. So the use of multi-factor authentication has in many cases been the savior for these processes where deepfake and synthetic voices have been used in anger against enterprises today. So with that kind of whistle-stop tour of where we are and how to think about the threat and detecting it, I'm going to hand back to George and to Connor to tell you about how Dayon is approaching this problem.
Thank you, Matt. That was quite enlightening and very interesting background on the topic. And now to hear more about what we're going to do about this and how Dayon can help you, Connor, mic is yours.
Thank you, George. Thank you, Matt. Very interesting. So let's delve a little bit deeper into deepfake attacks and what organizations can do to defend against them. And so being able to create a trusted digital identity brings many benefits to organizations and their customers as well. It can reduce friction, it can reduce operational costs, improve the bottom line of these organizations through customer retention, growth in customers, and drive significant operational efficiencies. The diagram here in front of us shows the core areas where organizations can achieve this, right? And includes use cases such as account opening, account recovery, authentication through all channels, be it web, mobile, in-person, or contact center. And to be clear, deepfake attacks that we're talking about today can take place in any and all of these use cases and channels. And we have developed very robust techniques here at Dayon to defend against that. That is our business, has been our business for many, many years now. But the core area of discussion today is on the contact center. And so I'm going to spend the rest of the presentation, that time I have available, talking specifically about the contact center. But these defenses that I'm going to outline to you actually work for the other channels as well. And I can provide more detail on that if people want. Okay, so let's move on to the next slide, please. Thank you. So deepfakes and AI threats. Yeah, is it real or is it hype, right? So Dayon is very proud to engage extensively with our customers, and we're always asking for feedback. We're always getting their views. And recently we did a survey of 250 business IT professionals just last month, and we asked them about their concerns around deepfakes and other threats. And all of them saw deepfakes as a threat, either now or in the future, or something that they have to pay close attention to. So all had it on their radar of concern. 62% were actually really, really worried about it. What's also very interesting is 69% of them reported having their customers come to them asking questions about this. So their customers were becoming concerned. And unless you have a good answer for your customer, you run the risk of reputational damage, right? And you know, as well as the financial fraud that can come from deepfakes, there is a reputational fraud that can come as well when from these bad actors actually proving that they can hack into something. So it's very much a concern in the case in the CISOs, the C-suite, the IT security executives of these companies. Next slide, please. So Matt has given you a quick history lesson, and we can build this out here, George, if you don't mind. What I want to do is just cover the evolution of the technology as it relates to deepfakes. And so on the very right-hand side here, left-hand side, excuse me, in 1961, you have a little machine that you probably have never heard of called the shoebox. It was developed by IBM. And it was very good at the time. It was state of the art, and it could recognize 16 words, 0 to 9 plus some letters, right? Or sorry, plus some English words. Only spoke American English, didn't identify who the speaker was, but it was state of the art. Roll forward 56 years, and we started to see these deep fakes, these attempts at deep fakes, particularly in the political realm. And you know, they took a lot of effort, and they weren't really scalable, and they were kind of easy to spot. Okay, I woke up this morning to more news about this happening, and we can expect us in the US in this election cycle to see even more of this, both here in the US and globally. But roll forward, so 56 years, let's compress it into 6 years. And you may have read recently the article in the Wall Street Journal by Joanna Stern, where she was, again, she colluded, and it took some effort on her part, but she was able to create a fake Joanna, as she called it, and she was able, on a conversation with the CEO of Snap, I believe it was, have him react to the opening part of that, which was actually her fake voice. But let's roll forward here. What she was missing was a brain to carry on that interaction, a fake brain, excuse me, not a real brain, but she took over the conversation herself. But what was not demoed in that example is the idea of being able to maintain the conversation over time. So let's roll forward 6 months. You know, we've all been listening to, you know, and seeing ChatGPT, Google Bard, and many of these large language models. And they're able to maintain these conversations. And so the expression that's being used today a lot when we debate AI and machine learning as well, the toothpaste is out of the tube, we can't put it back in, so now we have to deal with it. And that's very, very true. And so next slide, please, George. So it would not be a webinar if we didn't attempt to mess with invite the wrath of the webinar gods. And so just to give ourselves a bit of a challenge, we're going to, and keep it interesting, we're going to play for you 2 voice samples. We'll play them twice, and I'd like people, George will put up a poll, and if you don't mind, we'll ask people to vote. And the question you're going to get asked in advance was on the screen. And so with that in mind, like I said, we're going to play sample A first, followed by sample B, and we'll do it again, and then we'll ask you to vote, please. Okay, can we play sample A?
A journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step.
Okay, sample B.
A journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step.
Okay, and just to give everybody a chance to hear them both again, let's play sample A again.
A journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step.
And sample B.
A journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step.
So hopefully you've all had time to vote.
So votes are coming in, Connor. Let's give it, I see a lot of votes coming in here, percentages. I'm gonna give it about 5 seconds or 10 seconds here. More people are voting. It's about 60% of attendees have voted so far. Let's hold for a minute here. We got 70% voting so far. Great folks voting with that, so that's really good. Okay, wow, people are still voting. Okay, here we go. With 80% of the votes coming in, the first answer, 29%, the second answer is 53%, third answer 15%, and the fourth is 3%. So thank you everybody who participated. Again, the first one at 29%, second 53, 15, and 3%.
Okay.
So
put the slides back up. Okay, so let's see who is correct. So the 29% were correct. Sample A is real and sample B is fake. So of the hundreds of people we have in this call, everybody kind of expecting the test, everybody getting to hear everything twice, only 29% got it right. Sample B was fake. So what hope do contact center representatives who are handling hundreds of calls a day have day in, day out in detecting this stuff? They don't. We have to help them as this stuff becomes available. Next slide. So let's talk about what we see happening and what our customers are telling us they're concerned about, and as a technology company, where we see the technology going in the very, very near future. Okay, and this is today or very, very close, right? So first of all, for the purpose of this illustration, we have the contact center, be it the IVR or the customer service rep on the right-hand side here, and let's look at what's available to try and get through their defenses. Well, first of all, on the left, we have all our data. I mean, whether it's because it was hacked, whether it was inadvertently shared or we are just over posting on social media, pretty much all of the data that a contact center would use today to authenticate me through questions and answers is available on the dark web for purchase, and it's not that expensive. Okay, so that data is now available. Okay, what we're seeing in the industry, if we just move forward a little bit, what we're seeing in the industry today is the advent of machine learning capabilities, large language models, and generative machine learning, which creates this brain that if you play with ChatGPT, you can ask it questions and give it answers, and then follow up questions and have a conversation, and it's effectively conversing with you. Alan Turing, the late Alan Turing, would be amazed. The Turing test is gone. It's no longer, I mean, it's too easy a test now for things like ChatGPT and others to pass. So we have this brain that can actually maintain a conversation using the data on the left when talking to a person on the right hand side. And when that person would, for example, query something and ask them a question, it's pretty standard technology, this speech recognition technology that can turn the question into text. The large language model can then interpret the answer or generate the answer and feed it back. And what's different today, right, for the first time, is that we have these pretty much real-time voice generators. If you just hit forward, please, for me, George, that can actually generate the output in the voice of very similar to the person who's meant to be in the conversation. And so this conversation can go back and forward between people, between the machine and the people. So think about it. You know, we've had it in the cybersecurity world. We've had machines hack machines, and we've had people hack machines. But now we're at a point where machines can hack people, right? And the person at the other end will not know that it's not another human being at the other side. It really is a kind of a new dawn in terms of these kind of attacks in these areas. So but it's not all bad news. There are some things that we can do to mitigate these attacks, and I'm going to run through these very, very briefly and then focus on one in particular. So one of the things we can do is there are certain things we can do around best practice education with staff that can help detect that. Another technique that's people may be familiar with, we certainly supply that technology. If you're interested, other companies do as well, is biometric speaker voice authentication, matching the voice print of the voice of the person who's speaking to the voice of the person that's meant to be on the call, right? The third one is voice replay detection. So I know it's the voice of the person. Is it actually, are they live? Is it them, or is it somebody replaying a previous recording or elements of a previous recording? And we have technology that can help there too. The thing that's new, okay, and this is the bit where I want to focus some more time, is this adaptive synthetic voice protection. And this is a new capability. It's based on machine learning, and it allows you to detect in real time whether a voice is fake or is genuine. And it works because the paradigm is it's a firewall or an antivirus that can say, all right, I'm looking for certain signatures in this voice, certain errors that the human ear can't pick up on, but the system can, and it's trained on data, right? And when you put these four together, you have a very robust channel-centric approach, okay, that allows you to, if you're in the call center only, the contact center only, you're able to focus, you're able to deal with it in that area. However, if we take it to if you remember at the start, my first slide talked about this identity continuity across all these use cases and all these channels. Our customers tell us that 90% of the callers to their contact center are calling in from their smartphone. And in the case of a bank, for example, most of the people who are banking have the smartphone app on the phone. So it's instead of just relying on the channel, the contact center channel, we have an ability to reach out. I call it cryptographically secure endpoint validation, to put without getting into too much of the technology here, generate a private key in the hardware key store of the device, and then have that private key, which only exists in that hardware, digitally sign a transaction validation while you're on the phone. So, this is multi-factor authentication, but it's the highest and most secure level of multi-factor authentication. And I'm not talking about here sending an SMS or a password or things like that. I'm talking about having the user you say to them something like, "Thank you for being a member of the bank, sir. I see you're a member with our customer. You have our mobile app installed. Let me just send you a quick notification that will save all these questions." And I look at my phone, I go, "Yep, that's me," and it's done. And you can add to that by adding biometrics to it. So not only is it definitely my phone, right, that's in the transaction, but you can be sure it's me that's holding the phone at the time. And it doesn't matter where these deep fakes are being generated. They're not on my phone. You cannot, it's very, very difficult to bypass that level of security. It is the highest level of security available commercially today to protect these, the integrity of these calls. And it really takes 3 seconds to do. There's many different ways of doing it. The technology that we advocate a lot is FIDO, and you probably heard a lot about FIDO. We are board members of the FIDO Alliance, and we have this capability available for our customers. And because of our identity continuity approach, you can unify your contact center with your web and your in-branch even, and your mobile app capabilities all into one single view of the customer from a digital identity perspective. And that makes it very seamless and easy. You're bringing all that intelligence, identity intelligence, to bear. Next slide, please. So I want to talk a bit about the fourth of those 6 now. We call it X-Sentinel. And it's part of Daon's recently announced AI.X suite. And AI.X is a suite of AI technologies that ensures integrity and realness in artifacts. So for example, we have a component that does it for documents to make sure that when somebody's presenting their driver's license or their passport, it's a real and not a fake one. We have it for face, for example, as you're opening an account, to make sure that the person presenting their face as they're, for example, opening an account and they're taking a selfie to match against their driver's license or passport, that's a real face. It's not somebody injecting it or a video or something that's been downloaded from the internet. And we have it for voice. And in the, like every other technology component we have, we talk to our customers about what they would like, what are the key benefits. And as we've been working over a number of years with our customers, we've been anticipating this, and we've been asking them to help us craft the ideal solution for them. And here are some of the key things that they wanted, and we've made available. First of all, it's real time. It doesn't take 5 minutes to come back with an answer. It's pretty much near wire speed in terms of response. There's nothing the user needs to do. So unlike some of these other things, there's no enrollment required, no registration. It doesn't matter if the user is in a voice biometric or even if it's in a multi-factor solution that you have today. It can be a first-time call from somebody, and we can tell you with great confidence at the early part of the call whether it's fake or not. Okay. Again, I liken it to a firewall or a signature, you know, from days past. It's very easily integrated to the contact center. It's low cost, real time, and it's universally applicable. It doesn't matter what language or accent you're using. Next slide, please. So put it all together, and if we just build this out, you have to guard against this brain here in the left-hand side and these hackers attacking. You have your on-the-wire defense in the contact center, the X-Sentinel capability, and that can alert your contact center representative immediately as to whether there's a potential fake voice or not. And if you have a full identity continuity approach and identity intelligence deployed, you can actually leverage other capabilities that you have with that user, like reaching out to their smartphone and the app and asking them to approve the transaction. Again, all very, very simple. I don't want to spend too much time on this because we're going to run out of time and not allow time for questions, but we can provide much more information on this if you like. The key element is there are some really good, robust defenses against the emerging deepfake attacks, and they're available today. Last slide, please. So the key takeaways from me, it's a real threat and it's growing rapidly in sophistication. I mentioned earlier the Turing test, it no longer applies. We're way, way past that from an AI perspective. Computers can hack humans. We're going to see that, and we're going to see it happening. And it's an arms race, and you must defend AI-driven threats with AI-powered countermeasures. You just can't compete with non-AI based tools. It just can't keep up. There are effective channel-centric defenses today, but a customer-centric approach that brings all of the technology to bear in quickly and seamlessly authenticating the user is absolutely the best approach. And that allows you to enable trust across any event, on any channel, at any time, for any type of transaction from anywhere. And that's my presentation, George. I know we've got a few minutes for questions, hopefully. I know we ran a bit late starting, so hopefully we have some time. Back to you, sir.
Thank you, Connor. That was very informative. And again, thank you again, Matt, for covering the basics, and Connor for talking about the stuff. We've got a few questions that came in, and just in the essence of time, I'm going to talk about 2 of them here. So let me just quickly look at the panel what I have. Connor, a quick question for you. How quickly do we think this threat will evolve?
I think it's going to be very, very quickly. We're actually getting concerns right now from customers. We've had a number of customers call us you know, the pace of technology change is dramatic. Just look at what ChatGPT has done in 6 months, 8 months, right? It's completely changing, you know, how kids are writing their assignments, and many other things. But it's actually, and it's getting more powerful by the day. And these large language models and the ability for this thing to act as a brain and intermediate between the data and the consumer and maintain that context, that's there today. And you know, from what we're hearing and what we're seeing, customers are very concerned about it because they're starting to see the emergence of these attacks. Is it there yet? It's too early to tell, you know, but it's coming, and it's definitely coming in the next couple of months, in the next 12 months for sure. It's not going to be too that far away.
That sounds good. Matt, one
just
for you.
add,
Okay. Go ahead. Yeah, please
just,
go ahead.
just going to add to that, really. I mean, I think there are, whenever you think about a bad actor threat, you need to think about intent as well as mechanism and what else is available. And I think there are some cases in which, yes, this is an impending threat, and against consumers and businesses, I am quite worried right now. I think the other thing organizations need to think about is that if your existing security processes are dependent on your mother's maiden name and date of birth and social security number, then they're already full of holes, and bad actors have no need to go to any form of sophisticated attack to do that. The moment you start to improve your security, then you need to start considering how some of these other attack vectors might start to come to bear. So I think consumers and internal business processes should be really worried right now, and enterprises have absorbed the cost of all of these ridiculous security processes for a long time. I think the change, though, from the enterprise perspective, is the ability to scale these kind of attacks. So you don't just need an offshore call center to make the call and paying people whatever it is per hour to do that. I can make thousands of simulated calls and tie up your agents in doing it. So I think that's where the threat is right now for the enterprise.
And if I could just build on that, one last point, sorry, from an enterprise perspective for enterprise security folks on this call, how quickly can you react? Okay, because hackers react very quickly. So if it's a couple of months away, can you deploy these defenses in the next couple of months, right? Because as soon as it arrives, it's too late, right? You're already vulnerable. So it's really a combination of how quickly can the hackers move and leverage these capabilities, as well as oftentimes for good reasons sometimes, but enterprises move slower. And so you got to start, you shouldn't be thinking today about today's problem. You got to think about the one early next year or late this year and be putting your defenses in now.
Okay, and one more question, and then I want to be respectful of time. I can't but ask you a question, Matt, about contact center, since you're an expert. What are the most common use cases in the contact center attacks coming up our way?
Well, I think building on my previous kind of, if you looked at the hierarchy of risks that contact centers are exposed to today, and we're potentially talking about kind of the higher risk ones, then over dependence on knowledge-based authentication that can be socially engineered from the customer is the primary risk vector. And deepfake voices just make it easier to get those credentials off your customers at scale. So that's certainly why I'd expect the first scaled usage of this technology to be. So if you still are dependent on pins, passwords, or demographic questions, then you should be really worried, because fraudsters' ability to extract those at scale in an automated way, in a way in which more than just the least secure of your customers expects is the one that's coming down the line. I think there are then, on top of that, there are a variety of vectors of attack into the call center, but I think you need to think about the call center as just one dimension of the overall enterprise security. I remember back to the kind of early 2010s when the first mobile banking apps and things and online banking started to become prevalent, and there was just no security on those. I think we've done a great job of improving those, but like a leaky bath, fraudsters have gone to kind of the lowest point, and they're now attacking the call center. So IVRs being used for reconnaissance and information gathering, I think, is probably the current preference. Never even speaking to an agent, probably don't even need to create a synthetic voice, but they're still able to extract the information that they need. So just a few of the attack. It does require a bit more analysis on an organization by organization basis.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. And I want to be respectful again of time and close on everything here. And again, thank Matt and Connor for participating in this. Thank the audience who stayed with us throughout the course. Again, as a reminder, everybody attending here will get a copy of the recording, including the slides. You get a free access to the Frost & Sullivan radar report that I mentioned. And most importantly, to get early access to X Sentinel, our product that Connor announced on this webinar, please go ahead and fill out the form that we'll send to you via the email follow-up, or you can talk directly to any of your day-on account executives. So with that, I want to thank everybody again for making the time to attend the call. We're here to answer questions for you. Reach out to us as needed. Thanks again. Have a good rest of the day.
Thank you all.
Thanks.